What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. And with B&R season coming up, aka March 11th, where we are supposedly getting a huge shakeup, they kind of teased that there was going to be a stream the following day after the announcement is made, kind of explaining some of the changes. I'm sure going further in depth than what the article is going to go in once it actually is released, and kind of why some formats may or may not be getting changes and why some aren't. I guess it's kind of the same thing. But, that's what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to kind of give my overall predictions on what they're going to decide on each format, and then cards in those formats if I think there's going to be changes made to them. Of course, we're going to focus mainly on the Modern and Pioneer format because those are the formats that we talk about exclusively on my channel. They're the formats that I have a lot of fun playing. Not to say that any of the other formats aren't good, but those are the ones that I particularly like to play and focus on. So that's what we focus on here. Of course, before we get into the rest of the video, the predictions and things like that, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more discussion videos, more Modern Pioneer videos, of course, and other longer form content, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. If you go into the description down below, you'll see a link to my Discord server. Feel free to go follow that link. Join over there as well. I'd love to have you over there. And without further ado, let's go ahead. I'm going to kind of go into my predictions and my thought process for both formats and just kind of break down exactly why I think changes, if any, need to be made. So first format, we're going to start with Pioneer because I think it's going to be the simplest one. While I think you can make an argument for some cards getting banned, maybe something out of the Lotus Field deck to make it a little less consistent, maybe something from Amalia combo to ruin the consistency of that combo deck, maybe even going after like Vein Ripper or Sorin or whatever from the Rakdos Vampires deck that we've seen, or even go after like Treasure Cruise or something like that from like the Phoenix deck. And while I think you could definitely make an argument for all of them, I think even after having the Pro Tour, we've had a pretty diverse top 8 in that event. Honestly, even some of the decks that ended up winning the event, like Rakdos Vampires, definitely, at least on camera, up until the top 8, kind of struggled against the Lotus Field decks and didn't really come away with a win. So at least like a theoretical bad matchup for Lotus Field. I mean, it's a deck that can disrupt you on the early turns and then put like a giant 6-power flyer into play and then just absolutely beat you down with some pretty good creatures and accrue some extra value that way. Is able to beat one of the better decks in the format. On top of that, too, one of the most represented decks in the format, didn't even really make it out of the quarterfinals of the event, and I believe only put 2 decks in the top 8 as well. So I'd say we're at a pretty diverse metagame, even after the Pro Tour. Like, I think people are kind of gravitating towards, Rakdos Vampires because it was the deck that won the event. Typically, we see people kind of gravitate towards decks that do very well. So I'm sure we're going to see kind of more of like some of the combo players kind of popping up, playing Lotus Field and Amalia combo, a lot more Rakdos players, and of course the people that had been playing Izzet Phoenix are going to be continued to Phoenixing. So overall, do I think you can make changes to the format? Yes. Do I think they're going to make changes to the format now? No, I think it's relatively healthy right now. We're going to be coming into the RCQ season, so I'm sure, if there's anything that absolutely needs to be banned before the season starts or it becomes problematic at the beginning of the season, it's going to be corrected before we really get into any of the more major tournaments like the regional championships, going into the Pioneer format as well. So I'm going to predict no changes for the format, but I would not be upset and or surprised if 1 or 2 cards did see the axe just to kind of lower the power level a little bit of some of the top decks that are in the format currently. Next, and finally, we'll move on to the Modern format. And I think Modern is in desperate need of some help. I think for the longest time, it was one of the best formats. It was the most diverse formats. And I think to a point, Pioneer kind of got shat on because Modern ended up being such a diverse format. There was a lot of viable decks that you could play. Of course, we all remember, the probably mid to late 2010s where, after Splinter Twin and kind of like Pod got banned and things like that, the metagame was so diverse, we actually had multiple unbannings really before we had bannings, and the format was still pretty balanced. A lot of people loved playing it. It was the format of choice for, Pro Tours. It was the format of choice for, multiple stores, at least in my area around like Ohio and Indiana and Michigan, things like that. That was the format that they played because all the other formats just kind of like paled in comparison to the diversity of the format. I think as we kind of got into, the end of 2023 into 2024, and obviously some more powerful cards being printed and some strategies being overwhelmingly represented in the metagame, I think changes absolutely have to take so Modern can kind of go back to being a super diverse, high power level, but almost like so high power level that it feels balanced kind of format. So I have about 4 cards that I think could potentially see bannings on this list and have a good reason to kind of go and not exist in the format. And I'm going to kind of list them into most likely to least likely. So let's go ahead, switch camera angles here, and we'll go check out some of these cards that we could potentially be seeing on the March 11th ban list. To me, the most likely card to get banned from the ban list, or banned from the format rather, is Violent Outburst. So Violent Outburst, a red and a green instant that can cascade, and it gives your creatures +1/+0 until end of turn. Now, obviously, if you've been paying attention to the format, aside from this art is like super creepy and weird to look at, the most broken part about this card is the fact that it's an instant speed way to cascade. Now, I will say, like, from the Teamer Rhino side of things, arguably the most popular and the best deck in the format, it does it probably the most fair way, I guess as fair as you can, like, cascade. I mean, we've seen some very broken things with the cascade mechanic, and I think Rhinos just being able to, like, have this as, like, a way that they can leave up mana, and if the coast is clear, they can kind of go for this, and if not, they can kind of interact and disrupt their opponent a little bit and play a different game that way, I think is probably the most fair way to play Violent Outburst. And while I don't think that's necessarily healthy, I think it's definitely more okay than, something that Living End is doing, where they're planning on just absolutely wiping your board, punishing you for tapping out, not playing flash creatures, not playing ways to disrupt some of their other creatures when they also have ways to just, have free thought seizes and then bring them back and then continue to do it and manipulate the top of your deck. So even if they don't kill you, you're essentially drawing air and you're not going to be able to really do anything about it. And, again, just in most cases, being able to just put lethal into play while clearing the path for a lethal attack. And even if you can muster like a creature or two after the fact, a lot of the times they're going to put you to such a low life total where you have to answer every single creature on the board. You're not going to be able to do it. On top of that, too, Domain Rhinos, which is kind of like the new hotness when, Merge the Color Law of Manor was released, and we had Leyline of the Guild Pack, and just being able to have like this combo essentially in your deck where on turn 2, you're going to have this vigilant, hexproof, lifelink, first strike, trampling flyer that is going to be able to play offense and defense very well. And then you have access to instant speed Rhinos, which are also going to have those same keywords and absolutely just demolish the mirror. End up making life a little bit harder post Living End for the Living End decks. Overall, I think Violent Outburst, the good that it's going to create by getting banned is going to outweigh maybe necessarily the bad that's going to happen. I think at least having these decks play at kind of sorcery speed is going to help out a little bit more, but the fact that they can't have Force and Negation backup for something like a Violent Outburst, they're going to have to do it at sorcery speed, and they're going to have to be the ones to fight through Force and Negations, rather than other decks having to fight through the Force and Negations and then ultimately, losing those fights because, if you're having to, leave up mana for like a counter spell, like chances are, like even if you have 2 of them and you stop like the Living End the first time, they just play a Shardless Agent and you're in the same boat all over again. While you do have access to like Force Negation, you're essentially left with nothing, and they still have 6 Cascaders in their deck, in a deck full of ways to kind of cycle through it. So Violent Outburst, probably the first one that has to go, and I would say the most likely to be on the banned and restricted list come March 11th. With that said, let's go ahead and take a look at our next card. Orcish Bowmaster, for a while, has been the most played creature in the format. While Yawgmoth has kind of maintained, being the second or third most played deck in terms of metagame share, Orcish Bowmaster, in the decks that it's played in, is almost exclusively seen as a 4 of. You're never playing 1 of this card, you're never playing 3, whatever. You're never cutting this card, it seems. You're always having 4 in your deck, and it has made it the most played card in the format. Even when, Teamer Rhinos and Domain Rhinos and things like that are playing, Violent Outburst, even the Living Index obviously playing Violent Outburst, and, they're seeing, the top 3, or at least like the 3 out of the 5 most played decks, and those cards are not seeing more play than the Orcish Bowmasters that are in the actual format. While this card is kind of, at least to me, like innocuous a little bit, it's part of the problem where like you can't really play, these 1 mana dorks that aren't like the delighted halflings and things like that. So on top of that too, we have Ragavan, which again is probably another card that shouldn't exist in the format either, but I'm a little bit more okay with than I am something like a Bowmaster. As a Yawgmoth player, it would kind of suck to lose this card just because of like some of the other tricks and things like that you can do with it, with all the other cards in the deck. And really that's kind of where the problem stems for a lot of these cards, is they synergize super well with like the overall game plan of what the deck is doing. I think Bowmasters probably has seen its, probably seen its last days in the modern format, I would say. As we try to work towards having more aggro decks kind of be in the forefront of the format. And I think that kind of dictates a healthy metagame if you have multiple of each kind of like the basic archetype of decks, in aggro, control, mid-range, and combo. And obviously we know that a lot of the decks are kind of like these combo decks. We know that, I guess technically, Living End is like a combat deck or whatever, because you're ending the game by attacking with a bunch of creatures, kind of doing the same thing with like the Rhinos decks, but they just kind of go in a very unfair way of doing it, and we kind of want to get back to where, honestly, if Burn is a good deck in the format, then I think the format is doing something right. So I think we need to kind of move towards where like Burn and some of these other like small creature decks that have a little bit like these neat synergies that can kind of end up closing out a game, relatively quickly, without having to do things like cascade into a Crashing Footfalls or cycle a bunch of creatures and then bring them all back with an instant speed Living End. It's good for the format, and I think Bowmaster is another place to start. You could put like something like a Wrenn 6 here as well, but I think Orcish Bowmaster is a little bit of a bigger offender than, Wrenn 6 is. It's definitely seeing like a decline in play, as like 4-color and 5-color control aren't really viable in the current format, or at least, definitely not like heavily represented. You have players that are performing very well with it, but I think that's more on, pilot experience and, skill, rather than like the deck actually being a pretty good deck to play in the format. So Orcish Bowmaster is my next pick. Let's go ahead and move on to my second to last card, which is Leyline of the Guild Pack. So Leyline of the Guild Pack seems like a kind of innocuous card. I mean, really, it just makes all of your all your non-land permanents all colors, and it makes your lands every basic land type in addition to the other types. Of course, we've seen the videos where people play like a Leyline of Guild Pack turn 1, play a fetch land, and then they tap their fetch land for mana because it's all basic land types to play a Leyline Binding, and then going into Scion, and then casting into Rhinos, or playing some other like ungodly big creatures that are going to have keyword soup on top of them, and then just absolutely aggro and just crush their opponent. And, Leyline of the Guild Pack plus Scion of Draco has kind of made, these zoo decks a little bit more viable for the fact that, they have a lot of relevant keywords on them. They're decently big for like their cost. And while I guess that technically means that there is a viable aggro deck in the format, I don't think that any other deck should really have access to that. It virtually feels like it's free in the deck. Of course, it's not actually free, but you can kind of find ways to mitigate, Leyline of the Guild Pack's effect. Plus the fact that it's a 4 mana, you can cast off of 4 green, or, like any other, colors and stuff that you have in your deck. You can just play Leyline of the Guild Pack on turn 4, and your mana base can already support playing a Scion on turn 2 for the Rhinos decks and things like that. So you can play a Scion on 2, like play Rhinos on 3, and then you just play a Leyline of the Guild Pack. And if your opponent can't immediately answer Scion of Draco right then and there, then they're going to have a very hard time, because they're going to have 12 power worth of Vigilant, First Strike, Lifelinking, Trample, Hexproof staring them in the face, and they're going to have to find a way to deal with Leyline of the Guild Pack. And even if you deal with Leyline of the Guild Pack, you don't really want to be wasting your removal and stuff like that on Leyline of the Guild Pack. While people are playing like Boseiju in like their main deck and in their mana base, really, like, do we really want that to be the thing? Do we really want, like, you're forced to play green and you're forced to play 2 or 3 Boseiju because people are being able to play this combo and absolutely just run people over? Overall, like, I don't, like, while the card itself on like a power level scale in a vacuum probably isn't that great, but it's just kind of a symptom of like what a lot of these other cards are. And it's just how good are the cards around it rather than the card itself. And I think a lot of these cards are just absolutely busted when you put them in the context of the modern format and kind of where we're at right now. So I think Leyline of the Guild Pact ultimately has to go, maybe not strictly on the power level of itself, but everything that it enables and everything that you're able to do with it. You're able to pitch it to your other pitch elementals. You're able to play it to pitch it to force negation, solitudes, things like that. I think that if you're going to kind of neuter these Cascade decks, you also need to kind of take away their other mode, which is, again, playing like uninteractable, like big creatures. That's going to force your opponent to play some very specific answers. And when the format was already kind of adjusting to, Rhinos being one of the best decks, Leyline Guild Pact just absolutely turned it on its head, and you have to kind of be on guard the whole time when playing against Rhinos, because you just never know when you're going to get Leyline of the Guild Pact plus Scion and then just absolutely ran over, unless you're able to kind of keep up with it in a way kind of like Yawgmoth and like Titan and things like that, which I think we need to go away from more like the, these decks have like a decent plan B, but plan A is kind of like this combo that is going to win the game on the spot, which is okay. And to be fair, Rhinos doesn't really have that. But I think the fact that this is even an option is kind of gross. And do we really need this in the format? Like, if we take it away, is it really going to change the entire identity of the format? In theory, yes, it will, because there's a lot of decks just kind of jamming this into it. But I feel like it's so new, very likely is this going to get banned? Maybe not, but if it does go, I would not be surprised. So that said, let's go ahead and move on to our last card, which is, ding, 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 the One Ring. Isn't it crazy that, like, of all these cards, like, the One Ring is the card that I have last here? Don't get me wrong, this card is very annoying to play against. It's another card that kind of discourages aggro decks in a way, because you're going to get to draw cards with this card. You're going to get the protection from casting it. You're going to be able to draw so many cards with this that, really, aside from playing against like Rhinos or whatever, like, you're going to take 1 damage, draw 3 cards from this, and then more than likely, at least with the decks that are playing the One Ring, you're going to be able to combo off and kill them, at least with a higher likelihood. And you're going to be able to potentially find other One Rings to, again, kind of stall out the game, draw some extra cards, find more answers, keep finding a way to loop rings, what have you, So I think if you want to, again, promote aggro decks, and this is not me saying this is exactly, what we got from the December 4th ban list, where we got rid of Fury and Up the Beanstalk, was that we wanted aggro decks to kind of represent more of the format. And so I think the One Ring, while I think compared to the other 3 cards, is a little less egregious. It's a hair on the unegregious side, but I think if you're going to get rid of something like a Violent Outburst and an Orcish Bowmaster, then I think you need to ultimately get rid of the One Ring as well. Just because you end up having Titan having 0 bans, and it's already like the 4th or 5th most played deck in the format. I think it probably jumps up in usage even higher, just because you're going to be getting rid of a lot of like the tools and stuff that other decks can do to race the Titan deck. So I think if you get rid of the One Ring, or Urza Saga is like a caveat, but I think I like Urza Saga ultimately for the format. So I think the One Ring is just something that probably has to go for at least for the foreseeable future, or at least, I will take kind of a restriction on it to where you can only play 1 copy of it for flavor reasons, and the fact that you can't just, legend roll your ring. You're going to have to build a way to kind of get out from underneath of it if you choose to use it a bunch. So I think definitely like having it be more of a commitment to the board rather than just, hey, I play 4 rings on my deck, or, I play 3 rings and 1 in my sideboard so I can go get it with Karn, so I play virtually multiple rings, I don't think is necessarily healthy. So I think if this gets banned and or restricted, I'm good with it either way. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my predictions, thoughts for the Modern Pioneer format and the upcoming banned and restricted list. Let me know down in the comments below what cards you would like to see banned, maybe some potential unbannings. Personally, for me, I don't think I want to see any unbannings yet until kind of both formats prove that they're pretty stable. I think that's kind of like the sentiment that Wizards has kind of taken with the banned and restricted list, if the format is in a healthy place and it's been healthy for a while, you know, we can slowly reintroduce cards to kind of shake up the format a little bit. So personally, for me this time around, I wouldn't want to see any unbannings, but I can understand if other people want them. So if you do, please leave a comment down below what you think was going to get the axe, what could potentially come back. Of course, subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell so you know when other videos get posted. Please leave a like on the video as well if you enjoyed it. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.